My daughter hadn't spoken to me for 10 years. But the moment she found out I had become wealthy, she invited me to dinner at a restaurant. I told her, "You sold your mother for pennies." And in that instant, she heard something she least expected. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. My name is Nora Brooks. I am 58 years old, though most days I feel a decade older, as if betrayal ages a body faster than time itself. 10 years have passed since my daughter Jenna decided I was no longer useful to her life. She didn't say it outright, no, she was far too clever for that. Instead, she built silence into a we*p*n. My phone calls went unanswered. The letters I wrote, carefully folded, signed in my old-fashioned cursive, came back unopened, stamped with recipient moved. I would see her online sometimes, smiling in photographs, tagged in events with people who had once been part of our world, but she never acknowledged me. The last time we had stood face to face was a decade ago, at a family gathering where she made her dismissal public. Surrounded by cousins, neighbors, people I had known for years, she looked at me and said, "You're useless." A simple word, but one designed to cut, to humiliate, to strip me bare in front of others. She knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't a daughter speaking to her mother. It was a young woman auditioning for a new role in life, one in which I no longer had a part. 10 years of absence followed. No phone call when I had surgery, no card at Christmas, not even a word when her uncle, my brother, passed away. I grieved him alone. I grieved her too, though she was still alive. It's a strange thing, to bury a child in silence while she walks freely in the world. And then out of nowhere came the message. Not a phone call, not even a letter. Just a flat, indifferent text. "Mom, let's have dinner." No greeting, no explanation, no apology for the decade of erasure. I stared at that text for a long time. My hand shook, but my chest was stone. I should have deleted it. I should have protected myself, kept my dignity intact. But there is something about a child, no matter what they do, that keeps a mother tethered. A cruel instinct, really. A part of me whispered, maybe she regrets it. Maybe she wants to make amends. She chose the place. Of course she did. Not a quiet diner where two estranged women could speak in private, but a trendy restaurant in downtown Nashville, Harper and Stone, where chandeliers glimmered like inverted crowns and mirrors along the walls multiplied every face, every whisper, every judgment. A place thick with people who knew me by name, who had heard rumors about me, who were eager for a show. I understood then, this wasn't reconciliation. It was theater. I arrived on time, though my legs trembled when I stepped through the door. The hostess recognized me at once, led me past tables where half-familiar faces lifted their eyes. Jenna had reserved a table near the center, visible from all angles, as though she wanted to ensure no one missed her performance. She stood to greet me, her dress sleek, her hair immaculately styled. She smelled of expensive perfume, the kind that stung the air, and when she leaned in she gave me a half-hug. Quick, stiff, mechanical. I could feel the sharp edge of her shoulder bone against mine, as though even her body resisted closeness. And then she delivered her first line, pitched deliberately loud enough for the bar nearby to hear. "Don't forget to grab the check tonight, Mom. Now that you're rich." I froze the way one does when struck across the face in public. My heart stumbled in my chest. The words hung between us, a mixture of mockery and demand, and around me I felt the ripple of curiosity, heads turning, whispers stirring. At the bar, two of her friends giggled, raising their glasses. So this was it. This was why she had reached out after 10 years. I already knew, of course. Rumors spread faster than truth. People in Nashville had been whispering about me ever since I sold the old warehouse on 8th Avenue. It had been a dead property for years, bleeding me with taxes and repairs, until I finally cleared it and sold it to a developer for a clean $500,000. Add to that the modest rental income one had accumulated, and finally, the sale of my share in a delivery startup I had invested in years ago, back when no one believed in the business. All told, I walked away with $1. $2 million. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. I wasn't wealthy in the way Jenna's new friends at the bar imagined, but I was safe, secure. I could live without fear of medical bills devouring me, without the constant panic of watching dollars drain away. But Jenna didn't see safety. She didn't see stability. She saw opportunity. And tonight she wanted to make sure everyone else saw it too. I sat down slowly, my hand steadying on the edge of the table. The waiter came, poured water, and placed menus between us. Jenna barely looked at hers. Her eyes were on me, glittering, not with affection but with calculation. The kind of look I had seen on investors, on salespeople, on anyone who smelled money and wanted their share. I studied her face across the candlelight. 10 years had etched sharper lines into her expression. She had always been beautiful, her father's cheekbones, my hazel eyes, but now her beauty carried an edge like a blade honed for cutting. There was no softness left, no trace of the little girl who once pressed daisies into my palm and called them treasures. And I wondered, not for the first time, where did I go wrong? Because I hadn't been absent. I had given. Oh, how I had given. I remembered the years when she was small, when her father walked out and left us with nothing but debts and an empty closet where his clothes used to be. I worked nights at a diner, mornings cleaning houses, afternoons sewing for neighbors. I stretched one paycheck across 2 weeks, and when it still wasn't enough, I went hungry so she could eat. I remember the nights my stomach burned with emptiness while I sat beside her, pretending to be full, singing her lullabies until she drifted to sleep. I remembered Christmas mornings when the tree was small, but the effort was enormous. When I wrapped thrift store dolls with trembling hands so she could tear the paper and squeal as if it were brand new. I remembered the school plays I never missed, the parent-teacher conferences where teachers praised her wit, her sharpness, her brilliance. She's destined for more, they would say, and I would nod proud, though privately I wondered if more would ever include me. Through high school, through college, I supported her. I cashed out retirement savings I could barely afford to cover tuition when scholarships didn't stretch far enough. I drove 6 hours in a borrowed car to move her into dorm rooms. I worked double shifts when she called, panicked about needing money for books. And when she graduated, she didn't thank me. She told me coldly that I had done what any parent should. So yes, when she called me useless, I felt the truth of it, because she had already erased everything I had given. Now across this glossy restaurant table, she sat as if none of that had happened. As if 10 years of silence had been a pause button she could press and release whenever it suited her. And the first thing she did was announce for all to hear that I was rich. The waiter returned, asking if we wanted to order wine. Jenna flashed a bright smile, the kind she used when performing. Yes, the Prosecco, she said, not glancing at the price. I saw it on the menu. $95 for a bottle that could be bought at the store for $12. She didn't even ask if I wanted it. When the waiter left, she leaned back, eyes sharp. So, Mom, tell me how it feels to finally have money. I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because of how predictable it was. After 10 years, this was her opening question. Not how are you? Not where have you been? Not even the barest attempt at apology. Just, tell me about the money. And I thought then, as I had thought many times before, that silence is not emptiness. Silence is full. Full of contempt, full of dismissal, full of meaning. 10 years of silence had been her answer. And tonight, her words confirmed it. She hadn't invited me to dinner to reconcile. She had invited me to dinner to lay claim. And she wanted an audience while she did it. Jenna hadn't chosen a quiet corner of Harper and Stone. No, our table sat beneath the glow of pendant lights near the stage, where every Friday an open mic lured the bold, the desperate, and the drunk into performing. The placement wasn't accidental. I knew my daughter well enough to recognize staging when I saw it. She hadn't invited me for dinner. She had invited me to be part of her spectacle. She ordered without hesitation, her manicured nails tapping the table as if she were already impatient. "The duck confit for me," she said to the waiter, her voice dripping with entitlement. Then with a dismissive flick of her eyes toward me. "And for my mother, she'll have the salmon." She didn't even wait for me to speak. I corrected her quietly. "No, I'll have the roast chicken." Her lips tightened, the smallest betrayal of annoyance, but she masked it quickly with that bright false smile, the one that told me she was performing for more than just me. Around us, the restaurant pulsed with laughter, clinking glasses, and live guitar strums from the stage. A part of me wanted to shrink, to disappear into the wallpaper, to avoid the inevitability of what Jenna was preparing. But another part of me, the one tempered by 10 years of her silence, began to feel something else. A strange calm, like a soldier before a battle long foretold. Halfway through our meal, the host, A young man with a rehearsed smile and a clipboard strode toward our table. "Miss Harris?" he asked, and Jenna's eyes gleamed. "Yes," she said, brushing her hair back with exaggerated elegance. "That's me." The host extended the microphone. "Would you like to say a few words?" The trap snapped shut. Jenna didn't hesitate. She rose gracefully, the spotlight catching the shimmer of her earrings. She stepped onto the stage as though it were built for her alone. And with the mic in her hand, she turned to the crowd, her crowd. "This," she announced, her voice amplified, sharp and clear, "is my mother." A few claps, polite but uncertain, fluttered through the audience. Jenna didn't wait. She leaned into the microphone, her tone dripping with accusation disguised as sorrow. "The same woman who abandoned me when I needed family most." Gasps rippled through the room. I felt eyes turn toward me, some sympathetic, others curious, a few downright judgmental. Jenna smiled faintly, letting the pause stretch, milking the silence like a professional. "Tonight," she continued, "I came here to see if anything has changed. And as you can see," she gestured toward me with a theatrical flourish, "it hasn't." Laughter, quiet, awkward, spread among her friends at the bar. Someone muttered, "Ouch," under their breath. I sat frozen, the roasted chicken cooling on my plate. My daughter had *P***nized the stage against me, and the restaurant had become a courtroom where I was already convicted. At that moment, a waiter approached our table carrying a chilled bottle. He placed it down with a flourish. Prosecco, the very one Jenna had ordered earlier. He poured 2 flutes, the bubbles rising in cruel celebration. "And from your daughter," the waiter announced loudly, "to the best mom ever." The line landed like a slap. Some people chuckled. Others whispered. I could feel heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from the fury that burned inside me. I rose slowly, steadying my hands on the edge of the table. The room blurred for a moment, and then sharpened with clarity. If Jenna wanted theater, I would give her truth. I walked to the stage. The host looked startled, as though I were breaking an unspoken rule. But I took the microphone from Jenna's hand. Her smile faltered just slightly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room was already listening. "Jenna," I said evenly, "you forgot a part of the story." The whispers hushed. Even the guitarist stopped strumming. "You forgot to mention the hospital," I continued. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, each one deliberate. 3 years ago, when I collapsed in my home and the doctors needed consent for emergency treatment, they called you. And do you remember what you said?" Jenna's smile vanished. She glanced at her friends as if willing them to laugh, to interrupt, to save her. But the silence in the room was impenetrable. "You refused," I said, my voice steady. "You told them you weren't available, that you couldn't be bothered. That was the day I understood how little my life mattered to you." A murmur swept through the audience. "And you also forgot," I continued, "to mention that after that day you blocked my number. You blocked my emails. You returned every letter I wrote unopened. For 10 years you erased me." Jenna's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. "That's not true," she hissed into the mic, trying to grab it back, but I held it firm. "It is true," I replied calmly. "And tonight, after 10 years, you invited me here not to reconcile, but to humiliate me. You sold your mother for pennies." The last line landed like a gavel. The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt like smoke. People shifted in their chairs, uncomfortable, as if they had suddenly realized they were witnesses to a crime they hadn't meant to see. At the bar, Jenna's friends lowered their glasses, their smirks fading. The waiter who had delivered the bottle looked at me with wide eyes, as though unsure whether he should apologize or disappear. Jenna's face was frozen, the mask of control cracking at the edges. She tried to laugh, a brittle, high-pitched sound that fooled no one. "Stop being dramatic, Mom. People don't need to hear this." But the truth had already seeped into the room. It was too late. I lowered the microphone, handed it back to the host, and walked calmly to my seat. My chicken was cold now, congealed, but I didn't care. I lifted my water glass and took a slow sip, as if to seal the moment. Jenna remained on stage, paralyzed for the first time in her life. The applause she had expected never came. Only silence, and silence I knew could be louder than any laugh. Jenna did not crumble on stage. My daughter was too let at deception for that. Instead, she pasted on a smile so convincing that an uninformed stranger might have mistaken it for confidence. She tilted her head, chuckled into the microphone and said, "Stop being dramatic, Mom. Really, you should hear yourself. You sound like one of those sad women who spend their days inventing tragedies. People don't care about all that. They only want to know one thing. How did you suddenly get rich? Was it luck? A lottery ticket? Some man finally deciding to take pity on you?" Her words dripped with poison, but her tone was sugary, designed to charm the audience back to her side. Laughter bubbled from the bar where her friends sat lined up like a row of vultures. One of them muttered something I couldn't catch, and the others snickered. I let the silence stretch before I answered. I had learned that silence unsettles bullies more than shouting ever could. Then calmly I explained. "The warehouse on 8th Avenue, I began. My voice was steady, clear. It sat empty for years. Everyone told me to give up, to sell at a loss. But I held it. And when the market turned, I sold it for $500,000. Then there was the rental property, small, but it gave steady income. And finally, my share in the delivery startup. Do you remember, Jenna? The one you mocked me for investing in? The one you said was embarrassing?" Her smile faltered. "I sold that too. At the right time. Together, it made $1.2 million. Not luck. Not pity. Just work. Just patience." A hush fell across the tables. People leaned in, listening not to a pathetic old woman but to someone who had survived, endured, and planned. But Jenna wasn't finished. She sneered, tossing her hair back, the microphone trembling slightly in her hand. "So you could have helped me all these years, but you chose not to? Wonderful." The line was delivered with mock hurt, calculated for maximum sting. Some diners murmured, uncomfortable, as if considering whether a mother had indeed been cruel. Jenna knew how to twist a blade. I reached into my bag. My fingers brushed against the paper I had carried for months, not knowing why I couldn't throw it away. Now I knew. I pulled it out. A copy of the hospital record from the night of my collapse. The page was worn, creased from being folded too often. I held it up for the audience, the bold black line visible even from the stage lights. Next of kin declined to sign. "You knew exactly where I was," I said, my voice low but cutting. "You knew I needed you, and you turned your back." Gasps rippled across the room. I saw a woman at the next table clutch her partner's hand. The waiter who had delivered the Prosecco stepped back, as though distancing himself from the farce. For the first time, Jenna's perfect narrative cracked. "Don't do this," she hissed, lowering the microphone, but the damage was already spreading. Her friends at the bar were whispering among themselves, their laughter gone. I looked at my daughter and felt a wave of memory crash over me. I saw her at 5 years old, running barefoot through the grass, daisy crowns in her hair. I saw her at 10, clutching a spelling bee ribbon, eyes shining as she whispered, "I did it, Mom." I saw her at 16, slamming the door in my face after I told her no to a party on a school night. And I saw her at 22, walking across the stage in her cap and gown, her face radiant as the applause thundered. How had that girl become this stranger who sneered at me in front of strangers? Jenna tried to recover. She leaned into the microphone again, forcing out a laugh. "She's exaggerating. Always has been. You know how mothers are. Controlling, dramatic. I'm the one who built my own life. I didn't need her help then, and I don't need it now." But her eyes betrayed her. They darted nervously across the room, gauging reactions. And what she saw wasn't sympathy. It was doubt. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as though they had been invited to a comedy show and found themselves at a trial instead. A man at the far table whispered something to his companion, who shook her head. The weight of collective judgment was no longer tilting toward Jenna. It was tipping away. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table, speaking not into a microphone but directly to her. My voice didn't need amplification. Truth carried on its own. "You spent 10 years telling people I was absent. 10 years painting me as a villain. But the truth is simple, Jenna. You abandoned me first. And you didn't do it because you were hurt. You did it because you wanted freedom from responsibility, from guilt, from the weight of gratitude." Her mouth opened but no words came. "Money doesn't erase that," I continued. "It doesn't erase the silence. It doesn't erase the hospital. And it doesn't erase tonight, when you invited me here not to reconcile but to shame me. The room held its breath. Jenna tried one last jab. Careful, Mom. People might start to think you're crazy. But the word fell flat, swallowed by the weight of what had already been revealed. I sat back, my hands folded neatly in my lap. My heart was pounding but my face was calm. Around us, the restaurant was silent but for the faint hum of the refrigerator at the bar. Even the guitarist had lowered his instrument, his eyes fixed on us. For the first time in 10 years my daughter was exposed, not by rage, not by revenge, but by memory. Jenna stood frozen, microphone dangling in her hand like a wee *p*, and she no longer knew how to use. The crowd had shifted. The faces that once smiled at her stories were now sober, their expressions clouded with discomfort. People who had leaned forward to listen were now leaning back, as though recoiling from smoke. She tried to rally. You think you can paint me as a monster? Careful, Mom. I can play that game too. The words came out sharp but hollow like glass threatening to shatter. I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch between us, let her stew in the realization that the audience she had counted on had turned restless. And then the sound of heels clicking against polished hardwood broke the tension. A woman approached our table, her presence cutting through the air like a blade. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair drawn into a sleek bun, and carried a slim leather briefcase. She moved with purpose, the kind of purpose that didn't ask permission. Are you Jenna Harris? She asked, her voice clear and professional, carrying easily over the restaurant chatter that had resumed in cautious whispers. Jenna blinked, startled. Yes? Who are you? The woman reached into her briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope. State of Tennessee Civil Enforcement. You're being served. Notice of account freeze due to attempted fraudulent access to the property of Nora Brooks. The restaurant buzzed instantly like a hive stirred with a stick. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked. I felt eyes darting between me, Jenna, and the woman in the suit. Jenna's face drained of color. What? That's insane. I haven't done anything. She laughed, a desperate, brittle sound that fooled no one. The officer placed the documents firmly on the table beside the untouched Prosecco. All relevant details are included. You'll need to appear in court tomorrow. I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm, deliberate. I logged every attempt, Jenna. Every email your husband sent me with fake power of attorney drafts. Every time you tried to reset my bank passwords from your phone. A judge will hear it tomorrow. Her mouth fell open, words stammering but refusing to form. The officer gave a curt nod and turned away, heels clicking as she disappeared through the restaurant doors, leaving behind the sound of a collective gasp. Jenna snatched up the papers, flipping through them frantically. I watched her eyes dart across the lines, searching for some loophole, some escape. The mask of control she had worn so perfectly all evening began to crack, piece by piece. Her friends at the bar whispered furiously, their faces shifting from amusement to alarm. One of them pulled out a phone, texting rapidly. Another raised an eyebrow at Jenna as if silently asking, is this true? Jenna slammed the papers back onto the table. This is ridiculous. You set this up, didn't you? You're trying to embarrass me. I lifted my glass of water, sipped and set it down. No, Jenna. You embarrassed yourself. I simply kept records. The waiter returned, awkward, uncertain whether to continue service. His eyes flicked from my daughter's furious expression to my steady one, and he hesitated. Finally, he asked quietly, would you like me to clear the Prosecco? Yes, I said. It was never mine to drink. The audience, because that's what they had become, not diners, murmured among themselves. I saw a woman at the next table whisper to her husband, can you imagine your own daughter doing that? He shook his head, his mouth tight. Jenna's hands trembled. She tried to reassert control, raising her voice so the room could hear. She's lying. She's manipulating all of you. You don't know what she's really like. But her words rang false. The more she shouted, the smaller she seemed. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice, forcing her to lean in to hear. Do you remember the pills? I asked. Her eyes widened. Yes, I continued louder now. The little vitamins you insisted I take last year. The ones that left me dizzy, disoriented, forgetting entire afternoons. Do you remember what the doctor found? Traces of sedatives. Strong ones. A ripple of shock swept through the room. The guitarist set down his instrument entirely, staring. And do you know what else my lawyer discovered? I asked, my tone sharp, deliberate. That months before, you were searching online for guardianship of elderly parents. For fast-track property transfers. Jenna shook her head violently. That's not true. She's delusional. The waiter reappeared, holding something small and black in his hand. His face was pale but resolute. The security footage you asked for, ma'am. He placed a flash drive on the table. I nodded, slipping it into my bag. Thank you. What footage? Jenna demanded, her voice breaking. The one that shows your husband slipping forged documents into my mailbox, I replied, my eyes locking with hers. The one where he tries to mimic my handwriting on the signatures. It's all there. Gasps, murmurs, the unmistakable rustle of someone beginning to record on their phone. Jenna's face contorted with fury. You set me up, she hissed, her voice trembling. No, Jenna, I said softly. You set yourself up. I simply watched. For a long moment the restaurant was suspended in silence, heavy as storm air before lightning. Then someone at the bar clapped once, sharply, as if to break the tension. It wasn't applause, it was punctuation. A full stop. Jenna's hands balled into fists. You think this changes anything? You think anyone cares? You're still old, Mom. You're still alone. And nobody wants you. The words hung, cruel and childish, echoing against the high ceilings. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised, fed, clothed, loved, and for the first time I saw her clearly. Not as my child. Not as blood. But as a stranger who had chosen greed over family. You're wrong, I said, my voice even. I've learned to live without your love. And I'll live without your pity too. I placed a $50 bill on the table for the waiter, though my deposit had already covered the evening. For the service, I said, my eyes never leaving Jenna's. Not for the show. And then I walked out, leaving her standing there with her fraudulent papers, her unpaid prosecco, and an audience that now saw her for exactly what she was. When I left Harper & Stone that night, I thought the performance was over. I thought Jenna would retreat, lick her wounds, and perhaps spend the night drafting lies to justify herself online. But I was wrong. The dinner was not the end, it was the opening act. For months before, she had been rehearsing a different play. A darker one. One in which I was no longer a mother with rights, but a confused old woman who needed guardianship. I discovered the first act of this plan by accident. After my collapse last year, the doctors had run a panel of tests. I kept the results in a folder by my bedside, though I barely looked at them. But one line, circled in red by the attending physician, still haunted me. Traces of benzodiazepines in bloodstream. I hadn't been prescribed any. The doctor asked me gently if I was sure. Perhaps an old prescription? Sleeping pills? Anti-anxiety medication? No, I had said firmly. Nothing of the sort. At the time I had no explanation. I assumed maybe an error at the lab. But now looking back, the truth settled cold in my chest. Jenna. The vitamin she had pressed into my hand when she visited, rare visits carefully staged, were no vitamins at all. Each time I swallowed them I felt the fog descend. My memory would slip like water through my fingers. I would lose track of conversations, forget where I had placed my keys, wake up hours later unsure of what day it was. I thought I was simply aging, that the years had finally caught up to me. But the test results told another story. And my lawyer, Aidan Reed, uncovered the rest. Months before, Jenna had been searching online for guardianship laws in Tennessee. Specifically, how to prove elderly parent incompetent, fast-track property transfer, guardianship for dementia patient. The searches were time-stamped, the evidence undeniable. She hadn't been planning to reconcile. She had been planning to erase me legally, to transform me from a person into a ward. A signature on a line and my life would no longer be mine. The waiter from Harper & Stone had slipped me the flash drive quietly, as though he knew what it contained might be dangerous. That night at home I plugged it into my computer. The footage appeared. Grainy but clear enough. There was Jenna's husband, my son-in-law, walking up to my mailbox late at night. He looked around, checking the street, then slid an envelope inside. Later, I would open that envelope and find photocopies of documents that mimicked my handwriting. Power of attorney forms, property transfer drafts, forged signatures. I sat frozen as I watched the footage. My heart pounded, but not from surprise. From confirmation. Everything I had suspected was true. They weren't just trying to humiliate me in public. They were trying to incapacitate me in private. The next day, I returned to Harper & Stone. Not for dinner, but to speak to the manager. He looked at me gravely when I explained. "We saw it too, Mrs. Brooks. We keep footage for security. If you need copies for your lawyer, we'll provide them." And he did. A neat folder of video files, each one a nail in the coffin of Jenna's scheme. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, documents, and photographs. 10 years of silence condensed into evidence. Every refusal, every absence, every attempt to rewrite history was now written down in black and white. I thought of all the times I had doubted myself. The mornings I woke up dizzy and wondered if perhaps I was losing my mind. The afternoons when my memory slipped and I thought maybe Jenna is right. Maybe I am fading. But no. It wasn't age. It wasn't weakness. It was a setup. The next confrontation came sooner than I expected. Outside the restaurant, Jenna had grabbed my shoulders, her nails digging into my coat. "I just need the money," she hissed, her voice low but urgent. "You owe me." I looked her in the eye steady. "I owe you nothing but honesty and boundaries." She scoffed, her voice rising, the words sharp enough for diners at the window to hear. "You're old, Mom. Nobody wants you." "Wrong," I replied evenly. "I've learned to live without your love. And I'll live without your pity too." I walked away, leaving her with the unpaid check. The irony struck me later. The restaurant had already taken my deposit. Her little grand gesture of gifting me an overpriced bottle ended up charged back to her. A small poetic justice. But the larger battle was still looming. I met with my attorney the next morning. His office smelled faintly of leather and ink, lined with books that spoke of decades of fights like mine. He listened quietly as I laid out the evidence. The hospital record, the Dr*G test, the search history, the footage. His face darkened. "This isn't just manipulation, Nora," he said finally. "This is elder financial abuse. It's a crime." The word crime felt strange in my ears. To think of my own daughter in those terms was unbearable. Yet the evidence was there. She hadn't simply turned her back. She had tried to take my life from me, not with violence but with paperwork. We filed reports. The bank confirmed. 3 failed login attempts traced directly to Jenna's phone. A prepared transfer of $48,000 waiting in the queue. Never completed because the system flagged it. Proof enough for fraud. The police opened a file. A judge issued a temporary restraining order. I changed the locks on my house, moved my accounts, and registered myself as a vulnerable client at the bank. Now, any change required in-person verification and a secret code phrase. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't slipping. I was protected. But protection is not the same as peace. At night, I sat by the fireplace staring at the flames, wondering how I had come to this point. I thought of the little girl who once pressed daisies into my hand, the teenager who had cried into my lap after her first heartbreak, the young woman who had hugged me after graduation whispering, "We made it, Mom." Where had she gone? Had she ever been real? Or had Jenna always been waiting for the moment when love no longer served her? When money became more valuable than memory? I couldn't answer. What I knew was this. She had tried to make me the incompetent one. She had tried to rewrite me as weak, fragile, disposable. But I was still here. Still steady. Still mine. And for the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of something I thought I had lost forever. Rage. Not the wild, uncontrollable kind, but the cold, deliberate rage of a woman who has been pushed too far. The kind that doesn't scream but sharpens. The kind that waits. The kind that writes everything down. When I left Harper & Stone, I expected the night air to soothe me. I thought the noise of the restaurant would fall behind like a bad dream, that the cold air of downtown Nashville would wash the bitterness from my skin. But Jenna followed. Of course she did. The door swung open behind me with a bang, and I heard her heels striking the pavement like G******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* Don't you dare walk away from me, she hissed. I turned, the glow of the neon restaurant sign cutting her face into sharp halves, one lit, one shadowed. She looked like two different people in that light, and maybe she was. She grabbed my shoulders, fingers pressing hard through my coat. Her eyes burned, not with love, not with grief, but with hunger. The raw hunger of someone who had tasted wealth and refused to live without it. I just need the money, she said, her voice low, frantic. You owe me. I steadied my breath. I owe you nothing but honesty and boundaries. She laughed bitterly, too loud, drawing the attention of the diners inside who had gathered by the window. Boundaries? She spat the word like it was filth. You're my mother. That means everything you have is mine. Everything. Her nails dug deeper. I gave you my youth. I gave you my time. And what did I get? Scraps. Now you're old and you're finally worth something. Don't you dare try to cut me out. The window glass reflected us like a stage. Diners inside leaned forward, their forks paused midair, their drinks forgotten. They were watching the continuation of a show they hadn't paid for. You're old, Mom, Jenna repeated, her voice rising. Nobody wants you. Nobody loves you. You're alone. And when you're really sick, when you're gasping for air in some hospital bed, you'll beg for me. And I won't be there. Her words sliced, but the wound was old, already scarred. Wrong, I said evenly. My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. I've learned to live without your love. And I'll live without your pity too. For the first time that evening, her face faltered. A tremor crossed her mouth, the faintest flicker of uncertainty. But she doubled down, her anger lashing out like a whip. You think you've won because you embarrassed me tonight? Because you found a lawyer and some paperwork? That doesn't matter. You're still just an old woman sitting in a house too big for her. You're still nothing without me. I stepped back, shaking her hands off my shoulders. No, Jenna. I'm nothing without my dignity. And I won't trade it for your approval ever again. Behind us, a waiter opened the restaurant door slightly, watching. Diners pressed their faces against the glass, their breath fogging the window. Every second was witnessed, every word recorded in someone's memory, maybe even on someone's phone. I turned to walk away, but Jenna lunged forward. You can't leave me with this bill, she shrieked, her voice echoing down the street. Do you know how much this costs? Do you know what they'll think if I can't pay? I stopped, my hand resting on my purse. The restaurant already took my deposit, I said calmly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Your grand gesture is charged back to you. Poetic justice. Her mouth fell open. She looked through the window at the waiter, who nodded quietly. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd inside, though quickly silenced by the tension of the moment. Jenna's face crumpled. Not with sorrow but with rage. You'll regret this, she spat. You'll die alone, and nobody will even bother to bury you. I stood beneath the neon glow. My shadow stretched long across the pavement, and said the truest words I had ever spoken. I'd rather die alone than live owned by you. The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed into my chest. For once Jenna had no retort. She turned sharply, her heels clattering, and stormed back inside, leaving me standing in the cool night air. I walked away slowly, each step deliberate, my breath visible in the chill. Behind me, the restaurant buzzed like a hive disturbed, voices rising in disbelief. But ahead, the street stretched open, wide and empty, waiting for me. I felt strangely calm, as if a weight had finally slid from my shoulders. Not victory. Not relief. Something colder, sharper. Finality. At home, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The silence was thick, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of peace. But peace built on confrontation is fragile. I knew Jenna. She wouldn't stop. She couldn't. And as I stared into the still water in my glass, I understood. Tonight wasn't the end. It was the line. The place where her grasp ended, and my refusal began. The morning after Harper and Stone, I woke with the sour taste of last night still in my mouth. Not wine. I had barely touched my glass, but the acrid afterburn of confrontation. My hands trembled when I reached for the kettle, though whether from exhaustion or anticipation of the war ahead, I couldn't tell. The phone rang at 8:03 am. Sharp. It wasn't Jenna. It was my attorney Aidan Reed. His voice was calm, clipped like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Mrs. Brooks, the bank has confirmed what we suspected. 3 failed login attempts, each one traced directly to Jenna's phone. I closed my eyes, gripping the counter. She didn't even try to hide it? She thought she was smarter than the system, he replied. She also prepared a transfer, $48,000, set to move into a joint account in her and her husband's name. The only reason it didn't go through was because the system flagged an unusual device. 48,000. I thought of the nights I worked until my hands bled, the years I cut coupons, the meals I skipped, and she had planned to siphon it away with the push of a button. The police have filed a fraud case, Aiden continued. I'm meeting with them this afternoon. We'll also request a restraining order. In the meantime, you need to move your funds. Today. We'll change every lock, every account, every point of access. Do you understand? I understood. Too well. By noon, I was sitting in the bank's private office, a guard stationed discreetly near the door. The manager, an older man with kind eyes, explained the new protocols. From now on, Mrs. Brooks, all changes require in-person verification. And we're adding a code phrase. Something only you would know. I chose the phrase carefully. Daisies in the yard. The flowers Jenna had once pressed into my hand when she was 5. A memory she had long since discarded, but one I still carried like a stone in my pocket. When the paperwork was finished, the manager leaned across the desk. Ma'am, I've seen this before. Children trying to take advantage of aging parents. But you're sharper than most people half your age. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. His words steadied me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't slipping. I was protected. But protection is not peace. That evening I sat with Aiden in his office. The walls were lined with law books, but also photographs of his children. Their smiling faces seemed like a cruel contrast to the war I was fighting against my own blood. He laid out the strategy like a general mapping a battlefield. We have 3 fronts. First, the fraud case. The bank's evidence is airtight. Second, the restraining order. With the police report, it should be granted. Third, the guardianship angle. They'll try to argue you're incompetent. We counter that with medical records, testimonies, and the footage. I nodded, though my stomach churned. Mrs. Brooks, he said gently, I need to prepare you. This will get ugly. They'll smear you publicly. They'll claim you're paranoid, unstable, perhaps even delusional. Are you ready for that? I thought of Jenna's voice outside Harper and Stone hissing, You're old. Nobody wants you. Yes, I said firmly. I'm ready. The restraining order was granted within days. Jenna was barred from contacting me directly, from approaching my house, from attempting to access my accounts. The paper felt thin in my hands, too fragile to protect against the storm of her rage. But it was something. And yet, the silence that followed was louder than any knock on my door. For a week, I lived in uneasy quiet. I cooked small meals, read in the evenings, tended to the neglected garden in my backyard. Normal things, but each one performed under the shadow of fear. I jumped when the phone rang, flinched when the mail arrived. Then one night I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps outside my window. Slow, deliberate. My breath caught. I crept to the curtain and peeked. A car idled across the street. 2 figures sat inside, silhouettes blurred by the fogged glass. I didn't need to see their faces. I knew. I called the police. By the time they arrived, the car was gone. But I had written down the license plate, my handwriting shaky but legible. It was Jenna's husband's car. Aiden filed the report the next morning. This strengthens our case, he said. But strength didn't ease the knot in my chest, the feeling of being hunted by the very people I had once fed, clothed, and sheltered. Meanwhile, Jenna launched her counterattack where she knew she had power. The court of public opinion. Within a week, she posted a video online. Her face filled the screen, eyes glistening with carefully staged tears. My toxic mother destroyed my life, she began. She spoke of abandonment, of cruelty, of being cut off without reason. She painted herself as the victim, a daughter discarded by a cold, bitter woman. I didn't reply. Not online. Aiden prepared a defamation claim instead, attaching evidence. Bank logs, emails, the footage of her husband planting documents. Two bloggers who had eagerly repeated her story deleted their videos within days and issued apologies after receiving our package. But the damage was already done. Strangers sent letters. Some pleaded with me to forgive. Others accused me of being heartless. "You destroyed your daughter," one wrote in jagged handwriting. I kept the letters in a drawer. Not because I believed them, but because I wanted a record. Proof of how far Jenna's lies could travel. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. Two of Jenna's former friends, women I had met years ago when they were all fresh out of college, reached out privately. They sent me screenshots of messages Jenna had sent them. Messages begging them to help find a fake dementia certificate for me. The words were like ice down my spine. She had planned everything. Not just humiliation, not just fraud, but legal erasure. A piece of paper to declare me gone while I still breathed. The puzzle was complete. I sat in my kitchen that night, the screenshots glowing on my phone. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, but the house felt like a coffin. She wanted me erased. And yet I wasn't erased. I was still here. My hands still steady, my mind still sharp. My life my own. I wrote it down in my journal. She tried to make me the incompetent one. But the only incompetence is hers. She underestimated me. And for the first time in months I allowed myself a grim smile. Because the war was no longer about survival. It was about truth. I thought the restraining order would silence Jenna. Paper is fragile, but it carries the weight of law, and I hoped she would retreat. Instead, she chose a louder stage, one where the law could not reach her. The internet. The video appeared a week later. A neighbor sent me the link first, then two more acquaintances, then even my hairdresser. I clicked reluctantly, my hand trembling over the mouse. And there she was, my daughter, framed in soft lighting, her makeup flawless, her voice breaking in perfectly timed sobs. "My toxic mother destroyed my life," she began, her voice thick with manufactured grief. "For years I tried to love her, to care for her, but she pushed me away. She abandoned me. And now she's punishing me for speaking the truth." She spoke of fabricated neglect, painting herself as the dutiful daughter of a cruel, bitter woman. "She cut me off," Jenna wept. "Not just financially, but emotionally. Imagine your own mother refusing to speak to you, refusing to acknowledge your pain. That's what I've lived with for 10 years. She left out, of course, the hospital, the pills, the forged documents. She left out the attempts to drain my accounts in the middle of the night. The comments poured in. Strangers typed words like knives. How could a mother do this? Money changes people. Poor girl, she deserves better. I read them all. Each one a reminder of how easily truth can be drowned in performance. My chest ached, but I didn't respond. Not a word. Instead, I called Aiden. "Don't post, don't comment," he advised. "We'll handle this in court. I'll draft the defamation claim. Every lie she's spreading online will collapse under evidence." He was right. Emotionally, I wanted to shout back, to claw my way through the screen and force strangers to see the truth. But strategy demanded silence. So I stayed quiet while Aiden's office assembled a package. The bank logs, the emails, the footage. A thick file of receipts that told the story Jenna refused to tell. Within days, two bloggers who had echoed her accusations received formal letters from Aiden. Their follow-up videos were almost comical in their sudden reversal. "We've been misinformed," they admitted, sheepish. "We apologized to Mrs. Brooks." But Jenna wasn't finished. She doubled down. A new post appeared, this time live-streamed. She leaned into the camera, her eyes wide, her voice trembling with righteous fury. "She's trying to silence me with lawyers. But you can't silence the truth. My mother is unstable. She's paranoid. She's sick, and people need to know what it's like to live with someone like that." I sat in my kitchen, the video echoing through the room. My teacup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Brooks, we need to talk." It was signed by two names I recognized instantly. Women Jenna had once called friends, women who had vanished from her circle years ago. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them in a cafe downtown. They arrived together, their faces lined with hesitation but also relief. One of them, Marcy, spoke first. We couldn't stay quiet anymore. Jenna crossed a line. The other, Elise, pulled out her phone. She asked us for a favor. Said she needed help protecting her mom. First we thought it was noble. But then we read the messages carefully. She wasn't trying to protect you. She wanted us to help her forge documents. She scrolled, showing me the screenshot *TS. My stomach twisted. There it was in Jenna's own words. Can you get me a fake dementia certificate? Something that looks official? I just need proof my mom can't manage her affairs. The message was timestamped, dated, undeniable. I felt the cafe tilt around me. I gripped the table to steady myself. She really asked you for that? Yes, Elise said softly. We didn't go through with it. We blocked her after that. But when we saw her video, when we saw her painting herself as the victim, we knew we had to come forward. I thanked them, though the words felt thin against the weight of betrayal. I left the cafe with the screenshot *TS burning in my pocket like hot coal. At home I forwarded them to Aiden. His reply came quickly. This ends it. She's destroyed her own case. Keep everything. Don't delete a single message. I obeyed. I printed copies, stored them in a fireproof box, tucked digital backups onto flash drives. I had learned my daughter's cruelty. I would not underestimate it again. But the nights grew heavier. Even with the restraining order, I felt her presence like a shadow in my house. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. Every car idling outside sent my heart racing. Letters began to arrive. Anonymous envelopes, some scrawled in childish handwriting, others typed neatly. Some begged me to forgive Jenna. Others accused me of being a monster. One read simply, "Blood is blood. You'll regret this when you're dying alone." I burned that one in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken until only ash remained. And still I could not shake the thought. My daughter wanted me erased. Not just from her life but from my own. Late one night I stood at the mirror, the house silent around me. I studied my reflection. The lines around my eyes, the silver in my hair. I did not see incompetence. I did not see frailty. I saw a woman scarred but unbroken. Not yet. I whispered to the empty room. You won't bury me yet. Jenna had her audience, her online sympathizers, her whispering friends, her rehearsed tears. But I had something stronger. Paper trails. Screenshot *TS. Footage. Records. And truth. She could spin her story, but the truth would stand silent and immovable, waiting for the moment to strike. The courthouse conference room was cold. Not just in temperature but in atmosphere. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, buzzing like hornets, casting every wrinkle and line in unforgiving detail. The table was long, sterile, polished to a sheen that reflected our faces back at us like fractured mirrors. I had not wanted to come. Mediation, Aiden told me, was a required step before trial. It's a chance, at least on paper, to resolve things without dragging them through court. But don't expect miracles. I didn't. Still, my hands trembled as I smoothed the fabric of my navy dress. I wasn't trembling from fear, I told myself, but from rage kept on too tight a leash. Jenna entered with her lawyer first. She looked radiant, as if she were walking into a gala rather than a mediation session. Her lipstick was sharp, her dress sleek. At her side, a new lawyer. Young, overconfident, with the kind of slick hair and expensive suit that screamed ambition over wisdom. When her eyes met mine, Jenna smiled. Not warmth. Not reconciliation. Triumph. The mediator, a weary man with wire-rimmed glasses, began with pleasantries. We are here to attempt reconciliation before this matter escalates further. Both parties will state their goals, and we'll see if compromise is possible. I almost laughed. Compromise? With a woman who had fed me sedatives to make me appear incompetent? But I remained silent. Aiden placed a steadying hand over mine beneath the table. A reminder. Control wins wars. Jenna went first. She folded her hands delicately on the table, leaning forward as though delivering a heartfelt confession. I want reconciliation, she said, her voice perfectly pitched to sound humble. The mediator nodded, making a note. Good. And what would reconciliation look like for you? Her mask slipped just slightly. Financial security. Stability. The chance to rebuild trust with my mother. That begins with her supporting me as she once did. Aiden cut in smoothly. Supporting or subsidizing? Her lawyer bristled. Objection. This isn't a trial. But the mediator gestured for Jenna to continue. She licked her lips, flashing a fleeting smile. Look, my mother has resources she doesn't even know how to use. She hoards them while her own daughter struggles. Reconciliation means she helps me without conditions as family should. The word family hung in the air like a taunt. Then it was my turn. I sat straighter, folding my hands in front of me. My voice was steady, deliberate, sharpened by weeks of sleepless nights. My terms are simple, I said. A public apology for the lies spread online. Deletion of defamatory material. Reimbursement of my legal fees. And most important, 3 years of no financial requests. Not 1 cent. Not one favor. Nothing. The mediator scribbled quickly. 3 years? That seems firm. Yes, I replied. Because forgiveness is not possible without respect. And respect cannot exist when every conversation is a transaction. For a moment the room held its breath. Then Jenna's mask shattered. Her eyes flashed, her lips curled, and she slammed her hand against the table. So no money? The sound echoed through the sterile room. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, whispering frantically, but Jenna shook him off. You'd rather throw your money at strangers, at banks, at lawyers, than at your own daughter? She spat. You'd rather see me homeless than admit you owe me? I stared at her, calm as still water. The only thing I owe you is truth. And the truth is this. You sold your mother for pennies. You poisoned her, slandered her, tried to erase her. That debt can't be repaid with money, and it won't be repaid by me. Her lawyer jumped in, trying to salvage the wreckage. What my client means is. But the mediator raised his hand. He closed his folder slowly, deliberately. It's clear there is no agreement possible. The silence was final, heavy. Jenna rose abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. She leaned close to me, her perfume sharp, her whisper colder than the room itself. This isn't over. I'll make sure you regret this. I didn't flinch. You already made sure of that 10 years ago. For a heartbeat I thought she might strike me. But she only straightened, adjusted her jacket, and swept out of the room, her lawyer trailing behind like a chastised dog. The mediator exhaled heavily. Mrs. Brooks, I've seen many families in conflict, but rarely one so stark. I wish you strength. You'll need it. I thanked him, though the words felt hollow. Strength wasn't a wish. It was a necessity. As Aiden and I walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight was harsh, almost mocking in its brightness. Well, he said, adjusting his briefcase, that ends mediation. Next step, trial. Let her bring it, I said, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. Because in that sterile room, among folders and lawyers and threats disguised as reconciliation, something became clear to me. Jenna wasn't fighting for love. She was fighting for money. And money was the one thing I was finally prepared to defend. The morning of the trial I dressed in black. Not for mourning, though something in me had died years ago, but for clarity. Black is the color of absolutes. No shades, no ambiguity. Just truth or lie, life or death, love or betrayal. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper. Its echoing halls carried the voices of 100 stories like mine, though few of them ever ended cleanly. I walked slowly, each step deliberate, as if I were marching toward the final act of a play Jenna had written for me without my consent. Inside the courtroom the air was tense, sharp with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. The judge's bench loomed high above, the state seal glinting like an unblinking eye. Aiden sat beside me, papers neatly arranged, his calm presence a steady anchor. Then Jenna arrived. She swept in as though the space belonged to her, her heels clicking, her new lawyer trailing close behind. She wore white this time, a calculated choice. Innocence. Purity. Redemption wrapped in fabric. She didn't look at me when she sat, but I felt her gaze like a blade waiting to strike. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge, a stern man with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, adjusted his glasses and looked down at us. We are here to address allegations of fraud, defamation, and petitions of guardianship. Counsel, proceed. Jenna's lawyer stood first. He was young, ambitious, his voice full of that courtroom bravado that feeds on spectacle. Your Honor, he began, this case is about a daughter who tried desperately to care for her aging mother, only to be met with paranoia, cruelty, and abandonment. My client sought guardianship not out of greed, but out of love. She feared for her mother's well-being. She feared others were manipulating her. She feared her own mother was slipping away. His words dripped with false concern, but his eyes gleamed with confidence. Then it was Aiden's turn. He rose slowly, adjusting his glasses, his voice calm but firm. Your Honor, what we have here is not love but exploitation. We will present evidence, bank records, forged documents, testimony that proves Jenna Harris sought to defraud her mother, Nora Brooks, of her property and her dignity. This is not a case of protection. It is a case of predation. The judge nodded. Proceed with witnesses. Jenna testified first. She clasped her hands in her lap, eyes shimmering with carefully crafted tears. My mother changed, she said softly. She used to be loving, supportive. But then she became erratic, paranoid. She accused me of things I would never do. She cut me off without explanation. I tried to help, I truly did, but she wouldn't let me. All I ever wanted was to make sure she was safe. Her lawyer guided her skillfully, each question designed to paint her as a martyr. She wept on cue, her shoulders trembling. Some in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, moved by the sight of a daughter in pain. Then came cross-examination. Aiden approached slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Miss Harris, he began, his voice deceptively gentle. Is it true that you and your mother had no contact for 10 years? Yes, she said, her voice trembling. She refused to see me. Or, Aiden countered. You blocked her calls, returned her letters, and refused to visit her in the hospital? Jenna froze. Is it true, he pressed, that when the hospital requested your signature for her emergency treatment you declined? She stammered. I wasn't available. No further questions, Aiden said smoothly, returning to our table. Her mask cracked. Then came my turn. I rose slowly, the eyes of the courtroom heavy upon me. My hands didn't tremble. I took the oath, sat, and folded my hands in my lap. Mrs. Brooks, Aiden began, can you tell the court why your daughter renewed contact with you after 10 years? I met the judge's gaze. Because she heard I had money. A ripple of murmurs spread through the gallery. And what happened then? She invited me to dinner. In public. She announced my supposed wealth to her friends. And then she humiliated me. Aiden nodded. What happened after that dinner? She and her husband attempted to access my accounts. They prepared forged documents. They tried to make me appear incompetent. I reached into my folder and held up the hospital record, the DR*G test, the screensh*TS from her friends, the footage of her husband at my mailbox. Each piece passed to the judge, each one a nail in the coffin of Jenna's lies. When Jenna's lawyer rose for cross-examination, he tried to rattle me. Mrs. Brooks, isn't it true you're paranoid? That you imagine conspiracies? No, I said calmly. It's not imagination when you have paperwork. The gallery chuckled softly, quickly hushed by the bailiff. One by one the witnesses came. The bank manager testified to the failed login attempts. The waiter confirmed the footage. Jenna's former friends presented their screensh*TS. Their faces pale with shame for having once been complicit. Finally, Aiden presented the flash drive. The courtroom screens flickered to life, displaying the grainy footage. Jenna's husband, late at night, slipping forged documents into my mailbox. The silence was absolute. The judge leaned forward, his expression hard. That's enough, he said. I've seen all I need to see. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Then he spoke, his voice heavy but clear. Miss Harris, it is evident to this court that you renewed contact with your mother immediately after her financial deal. It is evident that you attempted fraudulent access to her accounts. It is evident that your petition for guardianship is not motivated by concern, but by greed. Therefore, the petition is denied. A permanent protective order is granted in favor of Mrs. Brooks. Furthermore, Ms. Harris is ordered to delete all defamatory material and reimburse her mother's legal expenses in the amount of $17,400. The gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. The courtroom exhaled. I stood slowly, my legs steady beneath me. Jenna sat frozen, her face pale, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. She turned to me as I passed, her whisper like venom. You'll lose your family. I stopped, looked her in the eye, and answered the truth I had carried for a decade. I lost it 10 years ago. Today I stopped losing myself. The hallway outside was bright with sunlight, almost blinding. I stepped into it free, not from pain, not from grief, but from her grip. For the first time in years, silence felt like peace. After the gavel struck and the courtroom emptied, I carried the protective order in my purse like a shield. Thin paper, easily torn but heavier than stone. For years I had lived beneath Jenna's shadow. Her silence, her scorn, her endless hunger for what I had. Now finally the law had carved a line she could not cross. But freedom is not the same as joy. It is not even the same as peace. It is simply the absence of chains. In the weeks after the trial, I moved to a small house near a lake outside Nashville. I did not need the size of my old home anymore. Empty rooms only echo with loneliness, and I had heard enough echoes to last me a lifetime. The new house was smaller, humbler, but its windows opened to water instead of walls, to trees instead of streets. At night frogs sang. In the morning mist drifted across the lake like pale smoke. I unpacked slowly, methodically. Each box carried not just belongings but memories. A cracked casserole dish from the years I cooked dinners Jenna refused to attend. A faded quilt stitched by my grandmother. A jewelry box with earrings I hadn't worn since my 20s. I sorted carefully what to keep, what to discard, what to burn. The things connected to Jenna went into a special pile. Letters unopened, photographs where she smiled with a face I no longer recognized, small gifts she had given me in years long gone. One evening I carried them to the fireplace. The flames devoured them quickly, curling photographs into ash, turning ink into smoke. I watched until nothing remained. I began to build a life without the victim role. I joined a pottery class at the community center. My hands, stiff from years of tension, softened in the clay. I shaped bowls, imperfect and lopsided, but mine. I joined a book club where women my age debated novels, not betrayals. We drank coffee, not wine poured as we *P***NS. I volunteered at a senior center, teaching people how to recognize manipulation, how to say no without apology. Some looked at me with wide eyes, others with tears. "You understand," they whispered. Yes, I understood. Sometimes letters still arrived. Not from Jenna, she obeyed the order, if only because defying it meant jail, but from strangers who had consumed her online narrative. "You destroyed your daughter," they accused. "Blood is blood." I replied to one just once. I wrote, "Boundaries don't destroy, they protect." Then I folded the letter, sealed it, and sent it. After that I stopped replying. Their words were smoke. Mine was stone. On quiet evenings I walked the path along the lake. The water reflected the sky, calm or stormy depending on the day. I thought about how much of my life I had spent reflecting Jenna. Her moods, her demands, her silences. Now at last I was free to reflect myself. Yet freedom carried its own weight. Silence pressed against me differently now. It was not hostile, but it was vast. Some nights the quiet felt endless. I would sit by the window, a cup of tea cooling in my hand, and wonder, what is a mother when her child is gone but not dead? What am I when my role has been ripped away? I no longer had an answer. Still life continued. Seasons shifted. Leaves reddened then fell. Snow dusted the lake. Spring returned with green shoots pushing through mud. And I kept living. One afternoon while stacking books at the club library, a woman asked if I had children. I paused. "I did," I said finally. "But we lost each other." She nodded, not pressing. It was enough. Occasionally news of Jenna drifted to me. A friend of a friend mentioned she was struggling financially, her husband facing charges of his own. Another whispered she had moved apartments twice, chasing cheaper rent. I did not smile at her hardship. I did not weep either. I felt nothing. A hollow neutrality, as if she were a character in a novel I had finished reading. Yet sometimes late at night a pang pierced me. A memory of the girl with daisies in her hair, the girl who once whispered, "We made it, Mom." That girl was gone, buried beneath greed and lies, but her ghost lingered. I let myself grieve her occasionally, but not often. Grief is a luxury for what can be reclaimed. Jenna was not. I learned to celebrate smaller victories instead. A bowl emerging from the kiln uncracked. A neighbor waving as I passed. A senior at the center saying, You helped me say no to my son today. Each was a stone in the foundation of my new life. I was not waiting for Jenna anymore. I was not waiting for reconciliation, apology, or even acknowledgement. I had built a door, yes, but it would only ever open for honesty. And honesty was the one thing Jenna had never offered. So the door remained closed, locked by respect rather than blood. And I was content with that. On Fridays I still returned to Harper and Stone. Not to revisit old wounds, but to reclaim the stage that had once been used as a wee *p*n against me. The restaurant had changed in the months since my trial. Open mic nights had shifted away from cheap comedy and drunken guitar ballads. Now it was something different, an evening of stories of survival, as the manager called it. People came not to laugh at others but to bear witness. The first time I stepped back inside, I felt the ghosts of that night pressing at me. I saw the table where Jenna had sat, smiling with knives behind her teeth. I saw the stage where she had held a microphone like a gavel and declared me guilty of abandonment. I saw the faces of strangers turning to watch, their whispers sharp enough to cut. But this time when the host asked if anyone wanted to speak, I rose of my own choosing. The microphone was warm in my hand. The light above me was soft, not blinding. I scanned the room, new faces mostly, though a few familiar ones lowered their drinks, recognizing me. The whispers this time were curious, not cruel. I cleared my throat. I don't owe anyone but love, I said, my voice steady. I owe myself a life I can be proud of. The room hushed. For years, I continued, I believed motherhood meant sacrifice without limit. I thought giving everything, my time, my health, my savings, was the only way to earn love. I was wrong. Love that must be bought is not love. It is debt. And debt will eat you alive. A man near the bar nodded slowly, his hands clasped. A woman dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My daughter thought she could turn me into an incompetent, a signature waiting to be forged, a body waiting to be buried. She tried to erase me with silence, with lies, with paper. But I survived. And survival, I've learned, is not about clinging to others. It's about refusing to let them define you. I lifted my glass of cider. The bubbles caught the light, shimmering like sparks. So tonight, I said, my voice clear, I toast not to family, not to blood, not to forgiveness. I toast to boundaries, to scars that remind us what we've endured, to silence that protects instead of punishes, to myself. The room erupted in applause, not wild but steady, respectful. A chorus of hands striking wood and skin, echoing like a benediction. I felt the sound wash over me, not as validation but as witness. I was no longer alone in my truth. Later, as I sat by the fire in my lake house, a letter arrived. Thick paper, my name scrawled in Jenna's handwriting. I knew before I opened it where it had come from. The women's correctional facility outside town. Fraud, defamation, contempt. Her list of charges had finally caught up to her. I slit the envelope with a knife, unfolded the paper and read. There was no apology. No recognition of what she had done. Only complaints. She accused me of ruining her life, of destroying her marriage, of turning the world against her. She demanded I intervene, begged me to remember I'm still your daughter. The words were poison on paper. I read it once, twice, then held it over the fireplace. The flames caught quickly, curling the edges, blackening the ink until it flaked into ash. The smoke rose and vanished into the night air. I watched until nothing remained. That was the last piece of her power over me. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the crackle of the fire, the croak of frogs outside, the steady beat of my own heart. My life was quiet now, not empty, not silent, but quiet in a way that felt like peace. I no longer woke in fear of cars idling outside my house. I no longer jumped when the phone rang. I no longer scoured the internet for Jenna's lies. I was free. I am Nora Brooks, a woman who was nearly erased by her own daughter's scheme. A woman who was sedated, slandered, betrayed. A woman who survived. And every new day without fear is my sweetest victory. But survival carries its own question, one I cannot silence. What is the cost of loving someone who sees you only as a vault to be emptied? How many mothers have been buried alive beneath the weight of their children's entitlement? How many daughters mistake cruelty for justice, and theft for love? I do not know the answer. I only know this. I will not be one of them. I raise my glass again, this time to the empty room. To myself, I whisper. The fire crackles, the lake glimmers beyond the window, and the night folds itself around me like a cloak. The story is finished. The scar remains. And the scar is proof. I am still here.